Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. The Supreme Court on Monday passed directions for all courts across the country to extensively use video conferencing for judicial proceedings, saying congregation of lawyers and litigants must be suspended to maintain social distancing amid the coronavirus pandemic. The top court, which has restricted its functioning and is conducting hearing through video conferencing since March 25th, exercised its plenary power to direct all high courts to frame a mechanism for use of technology during the pandemic. A bench headed by the Chief Justice stressed that technology is here to stay. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the concept of virtual courts and the way forward. Joining me on the program today are Justice Satish Chandra, former judge of the Allahabad High Court, P.K. Malhotra, former Secretary, Ministry of Law and Justice, and J. Sai Deepak, Advocate of the Supreme Court. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Justice Chandra, I'd like to begin the program with you. Let's understand your thoughts and what you would like to say about the concept of virtual courts.
As I told earlier, the necessity is the mother of invention. This coronavirus is spreading day by day. So this is the outcome of that epidemic, and the e-courts have been starting in the Supreme Court, in high courts. Justice Chandrachud has taken the initiations, and he asked urgent cases should be listed. This is a good idea. At least something is going to be happened. Earlier, this e-court or video conferencing was used only in the district court for getting the remand of the under trial. That was very petty things and very small things there. But now regular hearing is taking place, and this is good because courts are closed, but urgent matters can be heard.
Right. Certainly. All right. So taking the discussion forward then, Mr. Malhotra, what are some of the directions that the Apex Court has given to the high courts? What are the key highlights? What is it that we need to bear in mind and make note of?
See, use of information and communication technology, popularly known as ICT, I think it's not a new concept. The process started way back in early 90s. And since then, the government of India has been providing enough resources to the courts, not only to the Supreme Court and the High Court, but even to the lower judiciary also, to use information and communication technology in disposal of cases. I think if we are asking for a way forward, then probably if you really want to reduce dependency in the courts, then use of ICT to the maximum is the necessity. And keeping that in view, way back in 2007, the e-court project was started by the Supreme Court. Prior to that, of course, the ICT was being used, but that was only to the extent of computerization of the courts. After computerization, putting your cause list on the website or making judgments available on the website through internet. That was the only thing which was being done. But actually holding the hearing through e-court, I think this is a concept, as Justice Chandra has also said, necessity is the mother of invention. People were little reluctant in hearing of cases through e-courts, because then you are not going to the court. You are sitting at the comfort of your home or office, and from there, the judge is sitting in his office, the advocate is sitting in his office, and the cases are being heard. And the direction given by the Supreme Court is that because of the social distancing, the situation which has arisen because of coronavirus, the situation which has arisen, to meet that situation, let there be e-courts, and through e-courts only the urgent matters will be taken up. And for taking up these urgent matters, the counsel has to make an application to the court, and if the court feels that the matter should be heard urgently, then it will be heard through e-court or the virtual court which we are talking of. But I think this is only you can say as in today, it is being done because of the necessity. But the project as such, as I told you, was started way back in 2007. But we have not been able to carry it forward for many reasons. Maybe first the connectivity was done with the Supreme Court, then it went to the High Court, then it got to the capital cities, and then it went to the district courts. It's a long process. The problem has been the technical glitches which we face. Either the electricity is not available at smaller places, or the internet connectivity is not properly available. Therefore, kind of confidence which should be generated among the litigant and the lawyers, that was lacking somewhere. But now, with the improvement of the system, and because of the necessity, a process has begun And I think if you really want an easy access to justice at a reasonable cost, then probably e-courts is the best method available, and it will definitely help in reducing the pendency of the courts also.
Okay. All right. Desai Deepak. So, what is the plenary power of the Supreme Court under Article 142 of the Constitution through which this particular decision has been taken?
So, frankly, I think whatever helps, let's call it transactional convenience, is something that the court can implement through Article 142. The one thing, because ultimately the power to formulate rules with respect to its own conduct is entirely within the Supreme Court's powers. But the one thing that I think that e-courts will make a difference is there is a decent chance that there will be greater preparation from both sides of the aisle when it comes to matters. And as a young lawyer myself, I dare say this, that young lawyers may stand to benefit from this particular facility more, because the optics of the courtroom will then change. The dynamics of the courtroom completely change. And it's not exactly an argument being presented before an audience of sorts where there are so many onlookers. It becomes a more personalized experience. Okay. Then for all practical purposes, this may end up resulting like an international arbitration where you're effectively addressing a private group, so to speak, as opposed to a public audience. Okay. These kind of optics make a lot of difference, because then, as opposed to the theatricality associated with advocacy, you then come down to the brass tacks of focusing on the merits, on the facts. Okay. And anyone who's done international arbitrations or even arbitrations in India for that particular matter will tell you that at the nature of advocacy, the quality of advocacy, and the style of advocacy is markedly different between, let's say, an advocacy made before a court of law and an advocacy before an arbitrator, so to speak. Okay, that is bound to have a huge effect. 3, it may bring down the length of arguments also that is presented, and people will be forced to come down to the point. So for instance, if you practice before a US Supreme Court, or let's say the federal court in the US, you will not be given more than 30-35 minutes to make your oral submissions. The rest of it must be captured in your written submissions. Okay, and the patience to hear a lengthy argument is typically less when the interaction is more one-to-one through an e-court. Okay, and that will automatically force the lawyers to come to the point as quickly as possible and to capture whatever they wish to submit other than the oral submissions through their written submissions. This has been something that several senior advocates have been proposing for a long time, so that matters can be disposed of early. The time of the court is better used for matters across the board, and we are not forced to prioritize certain kinds of matters over certain other matters, because for every litigant, his matter is as important as the other. Okay, and therefore I think the proliferation of e-courts is going to be good. I don't think we should immediately aim for proliferation at every level. Let the high courts and the Supreme Courts lead by example and prove that they are in a position to use this technology in a robust fashion, and that they're able to inspire the confidence, as Mr. Malhotra rightly pointed out, of the litigants of the bar and other members of the bench as well. And the reason why I make this point is the concept of e-courts is slightly misunderstood even by the courts itself, if I may say this with a lot of respect, because e-courts largely, in certain high courts, translates to using scanned copies of a certain document, as opposed to permitting filing of scanned copies itself. So you end up filing the actual hard copies, and then they are scanned, and then that is called an e-court. Okay, that I don't think necessarily works, because then that does not help in reduction of the docketing requirements of the court. And I haven't come across too many instances where a video conferencing facility is used even in the best of high courts, except for certain instances where the witness is unable to turn up in court because of indisposition or something else. Otherwise, this is a facility that's rarely used, and even during the course of day-to-day functioning, it is not exactly used in the manner in which it was intended in the first place.
Absolutely. You know, Justice Chandra, since we are here, taking this particular point that Desai Deepak is making forward, what has the judiciary's experience been with the use of technology?
This video conferencing was used in the court from the very beginning, since 1990, as Mr. Malhotra told, right? and it was used for recording the evidence when a party is in abroad or not coming to the court for any other regions beyond the control. But e-court was started this time, and as Malhotra said, this is just beginning. It is just beginning, but it will take time. Technology will have to improve a lot. For example, this hackers are there, and we have seen when proceedings are going on, midway they bring some prawn, they bring some anti-national slogans, and nobody can do anything. Even court cannot do anything. Even lawyers cannot do. Even technician cannot do. So that hacking problem is there, and cyber security is not there nowadays. Though we have the IT Act, Information Technology Act we have, but cyber security is not there, and you can say this threat is increasing day by day. So when court will start the functioning through the e-court or this video conferencing, then these problems will emerge. And as Mr. Malhotra said, that confidence of the litigant is not there because he is not accessible. What arguments are going on, where in India people are not having this facility, technology or literacy, and they cannot approach. So that confidence will go, and what they are doing, they don't know. And moreover, in very important cases, the leakage is also there. For example, there is a rape case. In a Nirbhaya case, it was said that the victim's name will not be disclosed. But when matter is going on video conferencing and arguments is going on, naturally the name will be leaked. And what is the evidence that will also be leaked, and authenticity of the documents will be doubtful.
Right.
And corporate cases, the secrets, the balance sheets in income tax matters and other matters, that will be leaked. So in future, these are the threats, and these will have to be improved. And in e-court, we have started earlier. Mr. Malhotra was the law secretary. So this income tax appellate tribunal, because there are some places where the cases are not there. For example, Ranchi, cases are not there. Hardly 2 or 3 cases are there, so they dispose of by the this e-court. So similar position is there, but this is a good beginning overall.
Okay, it's a good beginning, but there are several.
Future technology will improve, but this what I said, this hackers problem, so security and cyber security will have to be taken care by all things. Otherwise, your secrets will be there are some confidential information in the court file, so that will be leaked.
Right. Okay. It's a good start, but there are several challenges that need to be addressed. Is what you also
there are there certain challenges are there.
Let me take that point forward then, Mr. Malhotra. Is the system equipped to use this technology and overcome some of the problems that the justice has just raised?
Yes. I think Justice Chandra as well as Mr. Sai Deepak have both made a very valid and important point. First thing is, if you really want to make it successful, you have to ensure proper supply of electricity and electricity connection to the lowest level of the court. Simply providing computers to the judges or providing internet connection is not sufficient. I remember, I think the first e-courts at the High Court level started way back in, I think, 2016 or 17 in Hyderabad. And thereafter, other courts also started following it. But its success functioning will definitely depend on the availability of not only the infrastructure, in addition to the infrastructure, maintaining the e-court records itself is a problem, because paralegal staff or the court staff is not equipped as to how this record is to be maintained. Evidence is to be recorded, documentation is to be done, its accessibility is to be there, and it should be accessible to the litigant, to the counsel, as well as to the court. All these things are to be ensured, and for which probably it is still going to take a long time. It's not going to be that easy. Saidi made another very important point, that is with regard to the arguments which take place in the court. If it's a virtual court, definitely the kind of patience which you see when there is a direct courtroom proceedings, and on the virtual court, I think the kind of patience that you need will be lacking for the time being. Maybe because of technology or for other reasons, because whenever you change a system, you can't achieve perfection in a day. It takes time to come, that perfection to come. Therefore, during this transit period, I think lot many things need to be done. And the best way forward will be, I think, before you give an oral argument start or through e-courts or video conferencing, what is required is probably there should be a scope for filing the written arguments. and whatever is left out in the written arguments, a timeline frame should be given with the consent of the court to the counsels that they have to finish their argument depending on the case and the importance of the case, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever the court decides, that timeline should be laid down. So I think some working style of the courts have to change, and the paralegal staff has to be trained to take into account the use of technology instead of sitting face to face and deciding the cases.
Absolutely. Since we're talking about challenges, Desai Deepak, and since you sit or stand on the other side of the bench, it's important to get your perspective as well. What do you foresee as some of the biggest challenges as far as e-courts or virtual courts are concerned from an advocate's perspective?
So, honestly, there are a lot more positives to it than downsides. Okay. One is lawyers across the board, regardless of their age or experience or standing, so to speak, will get an opportunity to make an impact. That is perhaps the most selfish inference that I can draw as a practitioner. Okay, that's one. Two, it becomes a bit more of a personalized experience, notwithstanding the fact that it is actually technology through which you communicate. Okay, I don't say that the experience before arguing in a court directly is an impersonal experience, but for all practical purposes, it has an element of public speaking, and it has an element of theatricality, which ends up adding a lot of extraneous considerations to the submission. Okay, whereas when you do this in the form of, let's say, a one-on-one interaction, so to speak, through a video conference, then the focus is much more business-like. The focus is much more to the point. Okay, and apart from logistical issues which could be teething problems for any new system, I only see positives and merits, and it could end up increasing, let's say, the rate of disposal of these matters, and it could end up taking out the fear of the forum, so to speak, even in the minds of the litigant, and put them at ease to a significant extent. Okay, any establishment or a government establishment survives on certain optics, in terms of the majesty that it creates, in terms of the optics it creates in the eyes of the practitioners and the stakeholders and the litigants. Okay. It has its positives, it has its negatives, but if e-courts were to become the normal, then people will understand. So it may end up increasing litigation, but it may also increase the scope or the pace of litigation. Okay, I certainly see this as a very welcome move, and given the number of pending matters before the Supreme Court and the High Court, even if these two establishments, all the high courts across the country and the Supreme Court, implement it, to a significant extent, we'll bring down the pendency levels.
Okay, all right. Taking the discussion forward now. So, Justice Chandra, having discussed all these very aspects, talking about the challenges, talking about the positives, what do you believe is the best way forward, really, as far as e-courts are concerned?
E-court, as I said earlier, this is a good beginning, but I don't agree with the submission of my young lawyer that pendency will reduce. Because virtually more than 3 crore pendency is there in the country. And even in Allahabad High Court, there are 10 lakhs cases, 1 million cases are pending. And every day we have the list of 240 cases. But in e-court, hardly 1 or 2 cases can be disposed of, 3 cases can be disposed of in a whole day. But there, so many cases are there which requires only 2 or 3 minutes disposal. But in e-court, it will take time. And moreover, as I said earlier, apart from the logistic problems and other problems, there is another problem. This is the temptation with the record. You may recall that in Supreme Court, one order was tempted and some words were deleted. That is the Ambani's case, when he was asked to appear before the court, appear to court or not to appear court, no word was there, like something like that. But there was the signature of the registry persons, court masters. So they were held responsible. But how you will held the responsible in the e-court when there is no signature, now so many people are there, logistic infrastructure is there. So that is there. So such type of precaution will have to be taken in the future when this matter will be taken up. And pendency, about pendency, I said, this is not possible to reduce by the e-court in the present circumstances at least. And in foreign countries where e-court is functioning, and nowadays in Supreme Court it is functioning, there are hardly 2 or 3 cases Even in American courts, in London courts, there are hardly 2 or 3 cases in every court, so they can dispose of easily. But here is a crowd of the cases, so these points will have to be taken care of.
Sure. Okay. So, Mr. Malhotra, what has the experience been really of e-courts elsewhere in the world? I think I was reading a few articles about New York also applying this particular model, the UAE also, disposing of cases through e-courts. But is the system very different here in India, and is it a little more challenging here?
No, whatever little study I have done in this aspect, be it Australia, be it Canada, be it UK, be it US, so far as arbitration matters are concerned, I think most of the arbitration matters are now being handled through e-court system. And I think that is working very well. And in courts also, the system is working very well. But we cannot copy the model as it is, as Justice Chandra pointed out. The pendency in our country is too large. The number of courts in our country is too small as compared to the number of cases pending. So far as sincerity or intention of the government in implementing e-court project is concerned, I think it is beyond that. It is not questioned. Since 2007 onward, Government of India has been making available a lot of funds, even to the subordinate judiciary, which should be funded by the state government. Mind it, the intention is very clear of the government that e-court project should succeed. And in that direction, even the judiciary is also very sincere, and committee is working at the Supreme Court level, which is monitoring implementation of the e-court projects. And a lot of money is being pumped in. Only problem, as I said initially, was, and Justice Chandra also pointed it out, that cybersecurity is a big problem for us, and we have to take care of that. Then training the paralegal as well as the judges to use this cybersecurity as well as to use the e-court mechanism and to maintain records properly is another problem for which training is needed, and we still lack in that area. And most importantly, the connectivity and the supply of electricity has to be ensured, which probably we have not been able to do so far. Then, to generate confidence among the litigant, I think Syed Deepak also highlighted this particular point, saying it at the cost of repetition, the kind of confidence that need to be generated among the litigant with regard to the e-court system is likely to take some time. It is only if the system works effectively and efficiently, only then that confidence will come. And if you really want to reduce the pendency by using the e-court system, I think the best course will be, as I said earlier also, insist on the parties to file their written arguments, and the oral submissions will be on a limited point, which should be highlighted beforehand, and there should be timeline given to the counsel within which they must finish their argument. If we are able to do that, I don't see any difficulty. Why can't the e-court project be not successfully implemented in India? We are already doing it. A lot of work has already been done. And I think this corona virus has given us an opportunity to further take it forward as expeditiously as possible. Earlier, there was no pace, no speed to it. Now, at least we can put it on a fast track so that its implementation becomes a reality.
Okay, all right. And J. Sai Deepak, I'm going to get a closing comment in from you on the program right now. It's okay at the Supreme Court level and at the High Court level, but when you go down to the district courts, is it something that is a viable option?
Frankly, with my limited exposure of the district courts, we sometimes end up underestimating the district courts. And I have seen some of the brightest of minds adorn the benches of the district courts, especially the young generation, which is taken to the subordinate judiciary very, very actively. And they end up being perhaps even more open to initiatives such as e-courts than perhaps one would expect. Okay. So if the infrastructure support that they're supposed to get is given to them, I don't see why district courts cannot do this. At the very least, in urban centers, if district courts and let's say the subordinate judiciary can start adopting it, I don't think it should be a problem. The issue is typically when you go to the hinterland, so to speak, the more interior courts. Okay. The one question there could be, in courts perhaps where the docket is not too much, and in certain courts where there is not too much of a crowd, so to speak, do you really need to implement this? Because the question that I am going to ask myself is, If the purpose of e-courts is to reduce the logistical issues and also the rate of, and to increase the rate of disposal, in courts where there are barely 15 to 20 matters a year, do you need the implementation of this particular facility? So for instance, the Uttarakhand High Court, compared to, let's say, the Delhi High Court or the Madras High Court, may not have as many matters. Okay, so while there is a tendency to homogenize the availability of a certain facility across the board, perhaps you may want to ask yourself whether the crowd of the court, the size of the docket of the court, justifies the implementation of this particular facility. I'm all for e-filing, I'm all for these kind of facilities, but sometimes it may not be necessary. That is also something that you may want to consider.
Okay, all right. On that note, then we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it on this edition. See you again next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.